about the government's continued response to the war in the Middle East. Let me start by paying tribute to our armed forces, and my thoughts and those of the whole House remain with them and those whose lives have been disrupted by this conflict. Since I last addressed this House, the costs of oil and gas have remained high, and last week the Bank of England estimated that inflation could be between 3 and 3.5% in the next few quarters. The full economic impact of the war remains uncertain, but it makes our economic plan even more important. To build prosperity that is secure and resilient, and to bear down on the cost of living and protect the public finances. Delivered through our ironclad fiscal rules, and today I will set out further action that I am taking. First, on global collaboration. Last week, the Prime Minister authorised the US to use UK military bases to defend the Strait of Hormuz. It remains the case that the best way to protect families and businesses is rapid de-escalation of this conflict. And to strengthen our collective security, I have announced that we will explore a new defence financing and procurement mechanism with the Netherlands, Finland and other EU and NATO partners. I welcome the IEA decision to authorise a coordinated release of our collective oil reserves to alleviate the immediate pressure on supply. And the UK has now begun the release of our share of 13.5 million barrels of oil. Second, on our energy security. The last government's failure to invest in energy was a failure to protect our country. But through determined action, this government is taking control of our own energy supply. Investing in renewables, lifting the ban on onshore wind and streamlining grid connections. Running the biggest offshore wind auction in European history last year and bringing the next renewable auction forward to this July. And driving forward negotiation on the UK's participation in the EU internal electricity market. We must guarantee our domestic oil and gas industry can also play a role in our energy system for decades to come. And so I can confirm that we are encouraging investment in tiebacks to make the most of our existing production facilities. We're rewriting the story on nuclear too. Construction on Sizewell C, agreeing an extension to Sizewell B, and we're due to sign the contracts on the UK's first small modular reactors in Anglesey, in partnership with Rolls-Royce. I will not tolerate red tape and vested interests holding back our energy security. So our new planning rules will unblock the pipeline of critical infrastructure projects. I can announce today that we will legislate to implement the Finkelton Review in the next parliamentary session. And I recently wrote to industry and regulators to get them to set out their plans to fast-track that implementation in full. To the parties opposite, who like to talk big about energy security, but then vote against the very infrastructure to build it, let me say this: it is time to put our country first. And I can confirm today that we are developing options to back critical energy projects with indemnities if their planning consent is challenged, so that we don't waste a single moment in protecting our energy security, because energy security is national security. Third, on households and businesses. I know that when prices rise and incomes are squeezed, people look to the government and ask, what are you doing to help? That's why, since the election, we have delivered and funded 30 hours of free childcare to working parents, wages rising faster than prices for every month that I have been Chancellor, and free breakfast clubs being rolled out at our primary schools. From next week, the 2-child limit gone. Day one sick pay in, and another rise in the national living wage. Prescription charges frozen, train fares frozen, the fuel duty frozen, and the state pension increasing next week by £575. And for businesses, £4.3 billion in business rate support, the Regulation Action Plan cutting admin costs for businesses, and the supercharger discount, followed next year by the British Industrial Competitiveness Scheme to take money off business energy bills. But I know that there is more to do. On trade, I can confirm to the House that we are aiming to conclude negotiations with the EU this year on the sanitary and phytosanitary agreement, which will directly impact food prices in our shops. And I have asked officials to look at where there are targeted reductions to agri-food tariffs, which can help bring down food prices too, balancing this with implications on domestic producers and food security. And later this week, I am holding meetings with supermarkets and with banks to discuss how they can further support their customers. We have a world-class competition and consumer protection regime. And since my last statement, the Competition and Markets Authority have stepped up their statutory monitoring of fuel prices, and I will update on fuel pricing within the next month. They are working with government to monitor the cost of household essentials for both price rises and disruption, and they've launched a market study into heating oil. Today, I can announce that we are going further to make sure that the Competition and Markets Authority have the powers that they need that were denied to them by the previous government to detect and to crack down on price gouging, bringing in a new anti-profiteering framework and considering time-limited, targeted powers for the CMA and other regulators. This week, the Business Secretary and I will convene the Regulators' Council to discuss their work to protect consumers. Because let me say again, this government will not tolerate any company exploiting this crisis at consumers' expense. Finally, I want to update the House on how I am preparing for this conflict as it goes on. I know that families and businesses are worried about the impact of rising prices. I have said that we will be responsive to a changing world and responsible in the national interest. And today I want to set out in more detail what that means. First, responsive. We don't yet know what the full impact of this conflict will be. So we must be agile in responding appropriately at each moment. We extended the 5p fuel duty cut, and we have pushed out the cheaper fuel finder, empowering people to avoid rip-off prices and chasing down the last few filling stations to reach 100% compliance. And when wholesale kerosene prices more than doubled overnight, we stepped in with £53 million of support to those who needed it most within a matter of days. And from next week, households will benefit from £150 off of their energy bills, thanks to the action that I took in my budget, with a price cap giving households certainty on their bills until July, ahead of the winter months when people use 78% of their gas. Second, we will be responsible. The spring forecast showed that the government has the right economic plan, restoring stability to our country's finances and family finances. I will not put that stability at risk. As we respond to this crisis, we must learn the mistakes of the past. The previous government pushed up borrowing, interest rates, inflation and mortgage costs with an unfunded, untargeted package of support under Liz Truss. That gave the support to the most wealthiest of households. Between 2022 and 2024, under the last government, households in the top income decile received an average of £1,350 of direct energy bill support. That left us with high levels of national debt. A cheque written then for a bill that is still being paid today. I can confirm to the House that contingency planning is taking place for every eventuality, so that we can keep costs down for everyone and provide support for those who need it most, acting within our ironclad fiscal rules to keep inflation and interest rates as low as possible. Mr. Speaker, this is not a war that we started, nor is it a war that we joined, unlike the advice of the parties opposite. But it is a war that will have an impact on our country. The challenges may be significant, but I promise to do what is right and fair, being responsive in a changing world and responsible in the national interest. And I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Chancellor Melstride.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Right Honourable Lady for advance sight of her statement. Mr. Speaker, the Right Honourable Lady comes to this House with an economy in tatters. She would have us believe that she has delivered the stability and resilience that can weather the storm ahead. But she has done nothing of the kind. When she came into office, she ramped up borrowing and spending and hiked taxes to record levels. She was warned at the time by the OBR and others that her policies would mean higher inflation, higher borrowing costs, higher interest rates, and that she would destroy jobs. All of that, Mr. Speaker, has come to pass. Her mismanagement and foolish choices have given us the highest inflation in the G7, the highest borrowing costs of any major advanced economy, with gilt yields higher than Greece and Morocco, fragile fiscal headroom, the highest unemployment since the pandemic and rising, and GDP per capita falling. Under this government, Mr. Speaker, we are getting poorer, and our economy is increasingly fragile and far from secure and resilient. And despite what the Right Honourable Lady has just said about tiebacks, nothing exemplifies this government's economic folly more than its approach to oil and gas. The utterly misguided net zero obsessions of the Energy Secretary have led to the absurdity of reduced extraction, whilst we see jobs destroyed, tax revenues foregone, and energy security smashed. And the greatest tragedy of all, Mr. Speaker, that in Jackdaw and Rosebank we have fields ready to go. In just months, they could be pumping vital relief to millions. Jackdaw alone has enough gas to supply over 1.5 million homes. Yet the Right Honourable Lady has nothing to say on that matter. And less oil and gas extraction means greater dependency and less security. This road leads to ruin. On energy, on the cost of living, on jobs, on growth, on public finances, on every measure that matters, this Chancellor has left us weak. And in the face of this energy shock, there are millions who are about to suffer as a result. So with respect to her statement today, could I ask her, how many fuel retailers have yet to engage with the new fuel finder service? And can she comment on the widespread reports of technical glitches and out-of-date price information? She mentions a small modular reactor planned for Wilfer. But given the need, can she explain why she has chosen not to go ahead with the large-scale nuclear site that was signed off by the last Conservative government? And specifically on energy cost support, can I ask her, what fiscal capacity does the Right Honourable Lady believe she has to support those in need? What is her plan to ensure that any targeted approach truly reaches all those who are in need? And on the matter of targeting, in her statement, Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor criticised the last Conservative government support package for not being targeted. But what she failed to mention is that the now Prime Minister was then urging for support to be universal. Indeed, he said at that time that Labour's approach would ensure, and I quote, that no household would pay a penny more on their bills. No consistency from the Right Honourable Lady. How is she going to ensure that support for those depending on heating oil reaches those who need it most? This support, Mr. Speaker, will of course, under this government, be funded through the taxes of hard-working people. Indeed, the reduction to energy bills this April is simply being taken from bills and being dumped onto the shoulders of hard-pressed taxpayers. But it does not need to be this way. For is not the critical question this: where is the control of public spending? Where is the renewed resolve to grasp the welfare bill, to get people off benefits and into work? I will tell you, Mr. Speaker, it is nowhere, because the Right Honourable Lady is a captive of her own backbenchers, and she has brought our economy one step from its knees. She knows it, the country knows it, and now we must all brace ourselves for what is to come. Not from a position of strength, as the Right Honourable Lady is so desperate to have us believe, but from a position of weakness, of her own making.
Chancellor of the Exchequer.
I think that statement only revealed that the Shadow Chancellor is utterly out of his depth. Mr. Speaker, in the last 20 months, we've had 6 cuts in interest rates. We have more than doubled the fiscal headroom compared with the headroom that I inherited from the party opposite. For the first time in 6 years, our deficit is less than 5% of GDP, and wages have increased by more than inflation for every single month that I have been Chancellor of the Exchequer, compared to the record of the previous Conservative government, which is the only parliament on record where people were poorer at the end of it than they were at the beginning. So I prefer my record to their record any day of the week. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Shadow Chancellor says that we should act. Well, we have acted. But what the Shadow Chancellor fails to mention is that his party supported us being involved in this conflict. Whilst we have called for de-escalation, the Leader of the Opposition said that we should be a participant in this conflict. The damage that that would have done to our economy would have been immense, and yet they make no apology for that. The Leader of the Opposition said yesterday about the Prime Minister that if he is creating a support package that is going to be done with taxpayers' money, then she thinks that we should be doing things that aren't going to cost the taxpayers' money. So on the one hand, you've got the Shadow Chancellor saying that we should do more and put in more money, and then you've got the Leader of the Opposition saying we shouldn't do anything. So where do the party opposite now sit on the £53 million support that we gave on heating oil? Because that was using taxpayers' money to support those who needed it most. It was the right thing to do, but now the Leader of the Opposition seems to suggest that that was the wrong thing to do. Now, the Shadow Chancellor asked a few specific questions. On the cheaper fuel finder that we have introduced, more than 90% of retailers have now signed up to it, and of that 90%, all of them updating their prices regularly, and we, along with the Competition and Markets Authority, are chasing down the final few that haven't submitted their prices. On small modular reactors, the party opposite say they supported it. They had 14 years and they put not a single penny of money into it. And the same is true of Sizewell C. You can't, on the one hand, say that you think that we should spend less money and then at the same time say that we should be supporting Sizewell C and small modular reactors, because everything has to be paid for. In terms of fiscal capacity, we have more than doubled the headroom compared to what I inherited from the Conservatives. It was less than £10 billion when I became Chancellor of the Exchequer. It is now nearly £24 billion because of the actions that I have taken. The Shadow Chancellor says that we haven't built contingency, where the exact opposite is the case. Now, the Shadow Chancellor says, what about Rosebank and Jackdaw? Well, it was because of the failure to do the work properly that it was challenged in the courts. And 1 month after the previous government left office because they were kicked out, the courts came back and said that we had to reconsider Scope 3 emissions. The energy companies, Shell and Equinor, resubmitted their plans at the end of last year. The regulators...
Oh, sorry. Between both of you, you can both go and have that discussion outside if you can't be quiet in here. Chancellor next.
This is important because the energy companies came back, thank you Mr Speaker, came back at the end of last year with their revised plans. The regulators are now considering those, and my right honourable friend, the Energy Secretary, will make a decision ahead of the autumn to decide whether it is legal to go ahead with those. But we made a commitment in our manifesto to honour existing licences. It's only because of the failure of the previous government to consult that we are in this position in the first place. And the honourable gentleman, the right honourable gentleman, says that if we cut the welfare bill, we will be able to help people. Well, I'm afraid they had 14 years, and he was the welfare secretary when the bills ballooned. So, frankly, we'll take no lessons from the party opposite. It is only Labour that can be responsive to the immediate challenges because we have been responsible with the public finances, committed to our long-term energy security and committed to make the right decisions in the national interest.
Dave McHillier, Chair of the Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, as the Prime Minister said yesterday, we have no idea how long this conflict will be, and he is not assuming it will be over quickly. So we live in troubled times, and it's quite right that the Chancellor of the Exchequer is making serious contingency plans as we move through spring, summer and into autumn and winter. But one of the challenges of targeting support, as she well knows, is the data that's available. So what is she doing to make sure that the data is available to target support to those who need it most, not just across Whitehall, but in local government and in the energy companies themselves?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and that is a really important point because the previous government hadn't done the contingency planning, and so when the energy price shock came along, they said we're not going to do anything to support, we're not going to do anything to support, and so they, in the end, had a choice about doing nothing or providing blanket support. And it was that blanket support that cost £78 billion. What we have been doing is working with the Department for Work and Pensions, with local government and others, to ensure that we will be able to target support at those who need it most. But that is in addition to what we have already done in taking £150 off of everyone's energy bills. We are doing the work. The prices come down in April for the following 3 months, and we are long way off of the winter when 78% of gas is used by households.
Daisy Cooper, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the Chancellor for advance sight of her statement, and our thoughts are also with our brave armed forces at this time. I agree that the last government's failure to invest in energy was a failure to protect our country. Today we face the stark reality where we cannot guarantee our national security, our energy security or our food security. When Liberal Democrats were in government, we launched the auction for onshore wind and we established the Green Investment Bank, helping drive down costs and quadruple renewable energy. The Conservatives' decision to scrap the Green Investment Bank has left our energy system more exposed and should be worn as a badge of shame. To shore up our energy security and to tackle the energy crisis, we Liberal Democrats have consistently argued for a three-pronged approach. First, to reduce energy demand by incentivising households and businesses to invest in energy efficiency without the tax penalties built into the business rate system or prohibitive upfront costs. Second, to fix the broken energy market that is unfairly inflating prices, especially for small businesses on our high streets. And third, to provide targeted support for the most vulnerable and for those with the highest energy needs. So I urge the Chancellor to consider our proposals, to create an energy security bank to offer low-interest loans for energy-saving improvements for households and small businesses, to reverse the cuts to home insulation programmes and to exempt business investment in energy efficiency from business rates calculations. Whilst action from the Competition and Markets Authority is welcome, it is not enough. Small businesses have been blocked from the best energy deals for years, well before Donald Trump started bombing Iran. Yet there has still been no CMA investigation into suppliers blocking access to these fair deals. So I ask the Chancellor again, will she please instruct the CMA to do this investigation without delay? On targeted support, families are fearful. Will the Chancellor consider zero-rating VAT on heating oil and LPG? Will she consider introducing a price cap mechanism for off-grid fuels? Will she commit to halving energy bills over the next decade by reforming pricing structures? And if bills rise to more than £400 a year, as some are warning, will the Chancellor commit to coming back to this House and outlining a broader support package so that all struggling households, or many struggling households, don't face a crippling hit of that scale?
I thank the Honourable Lady for her questions. Nick Clegg once said it will take 10 years to get nuclear power up and running, so there wasn't any point in doing it. It would only come in the 2020s. Well, imagine if that Deputy Prime Minister hadn't blocked investment in nuclear energy then, and we would be able to get the benefits of it today. But you had a chance when you were in government and you did absolutely nothing. And the party opposite opposed onshore wind, which is also helping to bring down bills. In terms of supporting investment in renewables and energy security, we have created the National Wealth Fund, which is prioritising investment in defence and also in energy security, including in things like critical minerals in Cornwall, carbon capture and storage, and the rollout of chargers for electric vehicles. And we've also put £14 billion into the Warm Homes Plan to help subsidise and support people to make energy improvements in their home to reduce their energy consumption and therefore reduce their bills, alongside the Warm Homes discount, and where we have doubled the number of people who are eligible for it. On businesses, we are, through the business rates consultation, looking at improvement relief to ensure that if people do make improvements, including on energy efficiency, that they won't then be whacked with higher business rates. And on heating oil, the Honourable Lady said we should cut VAT on it. Well, when they were in government, they increased VAT on everything. So it's a bit rich to say that they want to cut it now. But we have asked the Competition and Markets Authority to do a review into heating oil, which I set out today, as well as the £53 million of support that we've put in. But there seems to be a sort of slight contradiction in what the Honourable Lady is saying between whether she wants targeted support or blanket support. And I would argue that the progressive universal approach that we're taking is the right one. £150 off everyone's energy bills, but then targeted support for those who need it most, because we cannot repeat what happened when Liz Truss was Prime Minister. But a cheque was written then, and we are now paying the price with higher interest rates, inflation and taxes than we would otherwise have to have.
John Trickett.
Mr. Speaker, and I welcome the Chancellor coming to the House as soon as possible to make a statement. On profiting in the fuel sector, the last time there was a problem with oil prices was after the war had begun in the East. And the government then, following its laissez-faire market policies, allowed prices to rip to an extraordinary extent. And the consequence, as we saw, was outrageous profiteering within the energy sector. So, can the Chancellor indicate that we're not going to follow the failed laissez-faire ideology of the party opposite and intervene directly in the market to prevent outrageous profiteering occurring in this occasion?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and that's why we have the Energy Profits Levy and the Electricity Generators Levy, so that we can claw back any excess profits. And it's also why, on this side of the House, we believe in an active and strategic state, including empowering our regulators, like the Competition and Markets Authority, to ensure that the price gouging that we've seen in the past is not able to happen after the conflict in the Middle East.
Sir Edward Lee, the father of the House.
In an attempt to try and get some consensus here, may I commend one part of her statement, and I'm quoting, "We must guarantee our domestic oil and gas industry can play a role in our energy system for decades to come." Is there not a sort of sensible, middle-of-the-way approach here, that by all means we proceed with green energy, such as our offshore wind, where we lead the world in the North Sea off the Lincolnshire coast, but that we also have an open mind about extraction, new extraction from the North Sea? So will she confirm today, and I was listening very carefully to what she said in response to the Shadow Chancellor, that the Energy Secretary, when he considers these licences, will have an open mind so we can guarantee our resilience in the future?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his approach and his question. The oil and gas industry play an important role and will do for decades to come in our energy system. And we very much welcome the jobs that they create, the tax revenue that they provide, but most importantly, the energy security that they offer. At my budget last year, I set out the new North Sea oil and gas strategy, which includes allowing the use of tiebacks or infills on existing sites. Now, for the reasons that I explained, we now have a quasi-judicial decision that the Secretary of State for Energy and Net Zero has to take on Rosebank and Jackdaw. But of course he will approach that with an open mind, because this government does recognise the importance of our oil and gas sector.
Ready?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would my right honourable friend agree with me that the essential truth is that the government has introduced a package of measures to make the poorest families in Glasgow and across the United Kingdom better off, whereas the party opposite proposes to plunge these families back into extreme poverty? They left us with ridiculous levels of debt and the weakest defence since the 1930s, and their record is absolutely shameful.
Well, my honourable friend is right, but I would say it's worse than that, because it's the legacy of two awful governments in Scotland, one who made people poorer, and then the SNP government that fails to back our nuclear sector, which could deliver cheaper bills for people in Scotland.
Sir Jeremy Hunt.
Could I gently ask the Chancellor to be less partisan at a time of crisis? If she brings before the House, difficult measures that are right for the country, she will have the support of the whole House. But if she is partisan, she won't. And I actually rise to support her basic instinct, which is for targeted rather than universal support. 4 years ago, energy bills were heading to £4,000. We are nothing like that. We don't know what the oil price will be next week, let alone this winter. But most of all, although last time we gave support to households and families with her support by increasing borrowing, we cannot react to every single economic shock by further increasing our national debt. So will she confirm that when she comes to the House in her budget with targeted support, it will be fully funded and not funded by increasing, yet again, our national debt?
I thank the right honourable gentleman for that question. When the right honourable gentleman became Chancellor, it was on the back of lots of promises that there would be no support on energy bills. But the honourable gentleman and others recognised that that position was not sustainable. But work hadn't been done on how to introduce a targeted system. So the choice was a binary choice between blanket support or no support. And the right honourable gentleman took the right approach then in ensuring ensuring that people's energy bills didn't go through the roof. But a target approach would be more appropriate, because the top third of families under the previous approach got more than a third of the benefit. That's not right, it's not sensible, and all it does is drive up inflation, interest rates and taxes in the future. So it's not the fault of the former Chancellor that approach was taken, but we are using this period when energy prices are actually falling because of the approach I took in the budget to ensure that we are in a position in the autumn to have a targeted approach.
Luke Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm grateful to the Chancellor for her statement, particularly in setting out the long list of interventions this government has taken on the cost of living, which stands in stark contrast to the party opposite, who left the worst legacy on living standards in a generation. Can the Chancellor confirm that in the weeks and months to come, as she takes decisions encouraging regulators to take action and in contingency planning, that she will have that same thing in mind, protecting our constituents' living standards while also ensuring economic stability?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. And, you know, it's why what we did in the budget last year was so important, because in other countries, domestic energy bills are going up now. But because of the measures that I took in my budget last November, energy bills will fall from the 1st of April, despite everything that is happening in the Middle East. But I can tell you what would have the biggest impact on bills is if this conflict escalates, as the party opposite at the beginning wanted it to do.
Alistair Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Shetland is home to one of the largest onshore wind farms in the country, the operators of which are paid millions not to generate electricity because of grid constraints. So the announcement this morning of a trial in relation to discounted energy rates for communities such as ours will be one that will be met with some excitement, possibly. When are we going to hear the details of how that will work and what it will mean in terms of reductions to the bills of my constituents?
I thank the honourable gentleman for that question. On the issue of national grid infrastructure, which is why we end up paying for energy that can't be used, we've got to speed up those connections. And that's why today I said about consulting on indemnities for building out infrastructure, even in the case of judicial review, because we've got to act in the national interest and get this infrastructure built. But at the same time, the Secretary of State for Energy and Net Zero will set out more detail on the specific ways in which we can bring down prices for communities, including his.
Melinda Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents are appalled by supermarkets and other petrol retailers that are price gouging and profiteering out of global instability and a Middle East war that was backed by both the Tories and Reform. And let's make no mistake that if they were in government, our country would be right in the middle of it. Can the Chancellor set out the action she's taking to clamp down on price gouging? And can I thank her for the £9 million announced yesterday to help my constituents in Cowdenbeath and elsewhere affected by changes at Mossmoran?
I thank the honourable lady my honourable friend for those questions, and thank you for the campaigning work that she's done on Mossmoran to ensure that we can properly support her community, as we are also doing with the Growth Mission Fund. But we have introduced the cheaper fuel finder to ensure that price gouging doesn't happen by giving greater transparency to the prices offered by different fuel retailers. This is something that the previous government could have done in the last 14 years in a way that in France there is already a cheaper fuel finder available on all apps when you're travelling. We are introducing it because we want to ensure that our constituents have the lowest price possible when they fill up their tank.
Harriet Ball.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the current crisis, does the Chancellor regret in her first budget increasing by £150 billion over this Parliament the unfunded borrowing that the Office for Budget Responsibility said at the time was one of the largest fiscal loosenings of any fiscal event in recent decades?
The party opposite once believed in fiscal discipline, but that has gradually eroded over time. It is because of the fiscal rules that I introduced that we've been able to invest in Sizewell C and in small modular reactors. That was not possible under the fiscal rules of the last government. But I would also say that borrowing fell in the last year. That didn't happen under the last few years of the previous Conservative governments.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Chancellor for her statement, and I'm sure she'll agree with me that the biggest concern is the intersection between poverty and food and energy price hikes for our constituents. Will she look, as she prepares ahead, to a warm homes prescription so we can protect people's health by keeping their homes warm, which also saves money, and also ensuring sufficiency in the Crisis and Resilience Fund so local authorities can really invest in those in the greatest need?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and of course from next month families with children will benefit from the abolition of the two-child cap within the universal credit system. We've also doubled the number of people who can get the warm homes discount and put £14 billion into upgrading people's homes through the warm homes plan. But of course, as we look at targeted support, we will look at vulnerabilities within that.
Wendy Chamberlain.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor has mentioned several times about households benefiting from £150 off, but I have a constituent on the phone this morning who's been told that his energy bills are still rising and they are not seeing the savings that the Chancellor is talking about. What conversations is she having with energy companies to make sure that they do actually benefit from that fall in bills that she is very keen to talk about?
Well, I'd be very happy to see the particular details of that constituent because energy companies are, both through fixed and variable tariffs, passing on the £150 reduction that I brought in the budget by getting rid of the eco levy entirely and moving other levies from bills onto general taxation. So happy to look at the particular circumstances, but on average people should be getting £117 cut in their energy bills from April the 1st.
Jim Dix.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Chancellor for her statement. We have indeed, as she says, made good progress on stabilising our fiscal and economic situation since the election in 2024, most notably increasing the headroom available in our public finances, but as a result of the last government failing to invest in sustainable energy and nuclear, we are much more exposed to price shocks than we could be. Would she agree with me that it's vital that we do all we can to protect the most vulnerable in our community, such as constituents of mine in Dartford, from the price hikes in energy that will result from this Middle East war?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and for his constituents in Dartford and around the country. There have been 6 cuts in interest rates since the general election, and more than doubling of the headroom means that we have a bit more room for manoeuvre in the face of shocks. But I would also say, because of the actions of this government, gas is setting the price for energy a third less than it was just 4 years ago because of the investment in renewables that this government are making.
John Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the targeted nature of the measures announced, but 3 weeks ago it looked like inflation was going to return to the level that the Right Honourable Lady inherited when she took office in July 2024. That no longer is going to happen. But also, we see now the cost of borrowing, and given we're spending well over £100 billion a year on debt interest, what assessment has the Chancellor made of the implications of higher inflation and higher borrowing costs for the public finances?
I thank the right honourable gentleman for that question, and it is because of those concerns and not wanting to put any upward pressure on borrowing costs or inflation that we are looking at what targeted support can be offered rather than the blanket support the previous time that energy bills went up. The Bank of England offered their assessment on potential impacts on inflation, but as the Governor of the Bank of England has also said, the upward pressure on inflation because of the conflict in the Middle East is tempered somewhat by the action that I took in my budget last year, which reduces inflation between 0.4 and 0.5 percentage points, taking some of that upward pressure on inflation off.
Dan Cobb.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Chancellor for her statement. Can I ask her to do something for a specific group of people, and that is people in the private rented market who have to rent their home, and especially in more deprived communities like mine, their energy bills are going to go up, but still their biggest outgoing each month will be their rent, and it is too often exploitative in areas like mine. We had rent controls in this country from the First World War up until the dying days of Margaret Thatcher. What can she do, thinking outside the box, to tackle this issue?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and I recognise that in his constituency, like mine and many others, more people are in private rented accommodation than own their own home. One of the reasons why we introduced the Renters' Rights Act, opposed by the party opposite, is to give people greater certainty and to be able to challenge increases in their rents, as well as greater rights over eviction to exactly help constituents of his and all of ours.
Dougal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just 3 weeks ago at the spring statement, I cautioned the Chancellor that significant fiscal intervention would be required to protect businesses and households in the face of this war in the Middle East. And she said at that time that thanks to her actions, the finances of the UK were in robust condition. Now she prevaricates in order to protect those self-same public finances. The two things can't be true at the same time. 13% of constituents in Angus and Perthshire Glens are on oil, 5% in Scotland, 2% in England and 0% in Leeds West and Pudsey. Perhaps that's why she's provided 53 million to support oil users, where that won't even touch the sites.
It took 200 days for the previous government to act on heating oil. It took us under 2 weeks, with £53 million, and that money allocated based on the usage of heating oil in different parts of the country. So there will be no help for my constituents in Leeds West and Pudsey from the £53 million of heating oil, because we don't use it. But there will be support for Scottish constituencies, Northern Irish constituencies and many others as well, because it is the right thing to do.
Mr. Speaker, it is expected that food inflation will hit 4%. Now that means that a typical family's annual grocery bill will increase by approximately £240. And in Scotland there are approximately 1 million people that have experienced food insecurity in the last year. Food insecurity is closely linked to access and consumption of fruit and vegetables. And the Chancellor said that she is going to meet with supermarkets. Can I ask, what will the asks and demands be so that people can get improved access to nutritious and affordable food?
Well, from April the 1st, from next week, the two-child limit within universal credit will go, and food banks have said that will reduce the reliance of families with children on food banks, and that, of course, is a very good thing. There is also more that government could do to try and bring down food inflation, including getting a sanitary and phytosanitary deal with the EU, and we're committed to achieve that this year. That will bring down prices in the shops. It's opposed by the Conservatives and Reform because of their ideological dislike of the European Union, but it's the right thing to do to reduce food inflation for all of our constituents.
Esther Mann.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The sad truth is this. The Chancellor weakened the UK economy with her tax-busting budgets and her jobs tax. And this Middle East crisis has exposed that. Further, the Energy Secretary's actions are making it worse. And he's just refused to maximise drilling in the North Sea and issue new licences, which would give much needed energy security and affordability in the UK. So will she now see sense and overrule those decisions of his?
Since I became Chancellor, we've had 6 cuts in interest rates, and for every month that I've been Chancellor, wages have risen faster than prices compared to the previous Parliament, when people were worse off at the end than they were at the beginning. And if the Right Honourable Lady believed in energy security so much, why was she part of a government that refused to fund small modular reactors or Sizewell C and opposed onshore wind, the cheapest form of energy? If she believes in energy security, she should back it.
Andrew Cooper.
Speaker, my constituents are being exploited by unscrupulous petrol retailers who are not letting a crisis go to waste. A BP in Winsford, unleaded is 10 pence more per litre than the cheapest in the area. At Shell in Middlewich, it's 15 pence more per litre. Does the Competition and Markets Authority have the power it needs to clamp down on this unscrupulous behaviour?
So we've introduced the cheaper fuel finder to ensure that you have information like this, and most crucially your constituents have information like this. Already in France, you can see on any map, on an app on your phone or your sat-nav, the different prices of petrol at different filling stations. And that is where we will be in just a few weeks' time, once we have got that technology to work with those companies. The previous government had 14 years to do something like that. Other countries have, but we were without that facility. Being able to do that means that all of our constituents can make sure that we fill up at the cheapest cost.
Obviously, you didn't mean me, I know that. Don't worry, Gavin Robinson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. May I thank the Chancellor for recognising the disproportionate reliance on home heating oil in Northern Ireland, but recognise that the £17 million made available for 500,000 homes reliant on oil equates to £34 per household, and there's no data to target that support. The £81 million available from the renewables obligation for electricity, we were told by the Prime Minister and the Northern Ireland Secretary of State that that could be targeted, and yet Treasury officials are blocking that. I would ask her to look at that again. She's made the commitment not to reinstore the 5 pence of duty on fuel. Could I ask her to look at red diesel? Could I ask her to look at taking a look at the rebate for red diesel to help support construction and transport and haulage and energy regeneration in our country, to stimulate those parts of our economy that have a disproportionate reliance and have lost the support they so gravely needed?
I thank the honourable gentleman for that question. On heating oil, thank you for what he said, and obviously a disproportionate amount of that support has gone to Northern Ireland, given the greater reliance, and we encourage local authorities to use that money to target it at those who need it the most, and at the same time to ensure that everybody is supported. The Competition and Markets Authority are doing an urgent review to make sure that there is not price gouging going on. But we acted in a matter of days on heating oil, and that was the right thing to do. On red diesel, when we froze the fuel duty, we also took action on red diesel, but of course happy to ensure that the relevant minister meets with the honourable gentleman to talk further about what needs to be done.
Well, let's speed it up. Harpreet Tupple.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor will be aware that we have a strong manufacturing sector in Huddersfield and in Yorkshire, including in defence and SMEs, but they are feeling the pressure of rising costs, and the Middle East war has seen input prices go up and disrupted supply chains. So can I ask how she's particularly supporting manufacturers? Yeah.
My honourable friend is right about the importance of manufacturing in Huddersfield and more widely across Yorkshire. From the beginning of April, we are introducing the supercharger, which will take £420 million off the energy bills of the most energy-intensive industries, and the British Industrial Competitiveness Scheme comes in next year, which will help, I think, over 5,000 businesses.
I'll tell the chance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The fuel price shock that we're seeing caused by Trump's reckless war, highlights just how risky it is for the UK to be locked into these global fossil fuel markets. And of course, the CCC just recently pointed out that the cost of achieving net zero by 2050 is less than the cost of a single fossil fuel price spike, reinforcing the point we need to invest in the clean green technologies and get ourselves off being hooked on fossil fuels. Now, we've got a key problem in the UK because gas is coupled to electricity prices. Decoupling those prices is crucial. Will the Chancellor look at the report last week from Commonwealth that points out that decoupling could be achieved right now and would save households at least £200 each? Yes.
Thank the honourable lady for that question, and I agree that de-escalation is the best way to reduce bills for families and businesses. I would just gently say to the honourable lady, we want investment in renewables, and that's why we introduced the Planning and Infrastructure Act to make it easier to build them. But her party voted against that, which is keeping people's bills higher than they need to. We have had a third reduction in gas imports, and gas is setting the price of our energy something like a third less than it was just 4 years ago. And the electricity generators levy and the energy profits levy is ensuring that excess profits are taxed, and we can use that money to support the public finances and public services.
Justin Mathers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The consumer-focused, pragmatic approach by this government is such a contrast to the rhetoric of some on the benches opposite who would only see military action escalate and be in no doubt that it would be our constituents who would pay the price for that. So in respect of the CMA, I welcome the report this morning about what action they're taking to tackle rip-off vet fees, but that report took several years. So in respect of the new powers that the Chancellor's announced today from the CMA to tackle price gouging, can she confirm that the CMA will be able to act swiftly, nimbly, in real time to tackle companies who seek to exploit this particular crisis?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and it's absolutely right. The gung-ho approach of the party opposite would have made this crisis worse, not better, and our approach diplomatically has been to de-escalate this crisis at every stage, in part because we don't want that cost of living impact on families. In terms of the Competition and Markets Authority, as my honourable friend knows, we met them a couple of weeks ago to talk through what more can be done with cheaper fuel finder to roll that out, to investigate the impact on heating oil, and within the next few weeks the CMA will be coming back after that investigation and looking more widely about how to keep prices down for all of our constituents.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The £474,000 awarded to Dorset Council last week as part of the Chancellor's announcement is welcome, but I must tell her it really won't touch the sides, and more is going to need to be done to support rural communities. Unwillingly and unwittingly, the government is going to be profiteering from this by having a massive hike in VAT and duty take. Could I urge the Chancellor, because this would not add to government borrowing, to ring-fence either in whole or great part those excess receipts that she will be receiving, to ring-fence to support rural communities across the country as they face into this cost of living crisis?
Good question.
Thank you for what the honourable gentleman said about heating oil, and as well as the direct support for his local authority and many others, the CMA work is also crucial to stop businesses exploiting this crisis to increase profits. And as I said in the answer to the previous question, the CMA will be reporting on that shortly. What I would just say about ring-fencing certain tax revenues, it's clearly the case that a prolonged conflict is going to reduce other tax revenues and push up borrowing costs. So it's not possible to ring-fence a particular tax for a particular use, because other tax revenues are going to be coming down. But the whole reason we have the energy profits levy and the electricity generators levy is to have some sort of stabilisation in the system to bring in money to support the government and our constituents when it's most needed. And of course we'll be using it to do that.
Speaker, can I thank my right honourable friend for the serious approach he's taken to this conflict, and like the hokey-cokey approach
we've seen from the party opposite. Peterborough is willing to play its part developing our energy infrastructure, and we've already had £1 billion worth of private investment to upgrade the gas networks based out of Peterborough. But my constituents will know the price hike is not just about what's happening now in the Middle East. It's about a decade where we have not built the energy infrastructure this country needs. Will she reassure me that her plans today will speed up new nuclear, speed up investment in renewables, and get this country building the energy infrastructure we need if we have to tackle this for the long term?
Thank my honourable friend for that question. And it's great to see that investment coming into Peterborough, supported by my honourable friend in the gas networks. And that's in stark contrast to the party opposite, who got rid of our gas storage facilities, stalled on nuclear, stalled on renewables, and as a result has left us more vulnerable to an energy price shock.
Question, Ben Lake.
Speaker, what contingency planning is taking place to support non-domestic energy bills, especially in rural areas such as mine, where a great number of small businesses, community organisations rely on heating oil and LPG?
The best thing we can do to support households and businesses, and I'm sure he will agree, is to de-escalate this crisis and bring it to an end as quickly as possible. But as I've set out in my statement today, I will not tolerate businesses price gouging and earning excessive profits because of the conflict of the Middle East. That's why we've got the CMA with new powers to ensure that that doesn't happen, and why we are targeting support at those who most need it.